Intro Algebra Lesson 5-3A. We're at a point now where we're actually getting a lot of information provided, and we're going to take all this different information and start figuring out different methods for being able to take the information and write equations for them. And then obviously we can take those equations and we can predict what might happen down the road according to these linear models or real-life problems that might exist using this information. So in the past, just a quick recap, we wanted to always, at least in this point, we wanted to be looking at y equals mx plus b, or slope-intercept form, which requires us to know a point and a slope, or possibly the slope and the y-intercept, or the idea that we could be parallel to another equation, and then a coordinate. And with that information, we can always come up with our own new y equals mx plus b. So let's just kind of think for a moment here. What are the two biggest pieces of information needed to write an equation? Generally speaking, we need the slope and the y-intercept. If we can calculate those two things, writing an equation y equals mx plus b is really pretty easy. All right? So how many ways can we find the slope? What can we do to find the slope? Well, we know that we could count, rise, run on a graph. That's one method. We could also use y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. We could use the slope formula. And there's one more that we sometimes don't think about. We could be parallel to another equation. So we actually have three different ways that we could find the slope. It could be given to us, so I guess there could be four ways, but we could either count on the graph, rise over run, use the formula, taking two coordinates and find the answer, or we can say it's parallel. So if we know one equation's slope and we're parallel, we'd know the equation of or the slope of our new equation. How can we find the y-intercept? Well, one method is we could look on the graph. If we look at the graph, we'll see where our line actually crosses the y-axis. That's one method. Right? We know that we can plug 0 in for x and solve for y. Those are possibilities. Right? We could plug in, if we want to find the y-intercept, we can plug in a coordinate and a slope and solve for b. So we actually have a number of methods for solving both the slope and the y-intercept. Look at a graph, plug 0 in and solve for y, or you could plug in the coordinates into y equals mx plus b and then solve for b, which is what we've been practicing the past couple nights. All right? So now I'm going to present you with some new scenarios. So here's our new scenario. The steps for writing an equation, now that all you have are two given points. So now you don't know the slope. Now you don't know the y-intercept. You don't know that it's parallel to anything. And you're not just given one coordinate, but you're given two coordinates. So we're going to go through some steps that we could do to actually get there. Now think back to our list we made. I didn't give the slope, but there's a number of ways we could come up with the slope. So if I give two coordinates, like I mentioned here, giving two points, could we still find the slope? Sure. We could graph the 2 points and we could count. Or we could take the two coordinates and we can use the slope formula. Either method is going to allow us to come up with the actual slope. But we do need the slope. And then we're also going to have to figure out what the y-intercept is. So we could use the graph of those two coordinates and see where it crosses the y-axis. Or, after we find the slope, maybe we could go from there. So step one, let's go ahead and find the slope. We're going to take the two coordinates that are given and we're going to find the slope between them. That's why we have to know how to use the slope formula. After you have the slope, you'll have 2 points that you can choose from. Find the y-intercept, which we refer to as b, by plugging in the m that you just found on step 1 and one of the points. It doesn't matter which one. You do not have to do it for both of them. You simply pick one of them and you plug it into x and y, and then it allows you to solve for b. Here's the deal. in step number 1 is the only addition to what we've been doing the past few times that we've been in class together. Up until this point, you were always given the slope or some way of finding the slope off of the graph or the fact that it was parallel. So all we're doing now is just saying you have to be able to find the slope. Once you've done that, you substitute your m and your b into y equals mx plus b. Nothing should be in the x or the y. We're not going to have any coordinates in for x and y. All right? So this is exactly from here, 2 and 3, steps 2 and 3. This is what we've been practicing. All I'm adding is first you have to find the slope instead of it being given to you. So let's try it out. So we're going to write an equation based on this information. Usually what we do is we want to label. So x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. And we use our formula, which we know is y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. We've got to be very careful about where we put things. Accidentally, sometimes people will put x's on top, or they don't place the numbers in the correct order. If you don't take the time, the extra 10 seconds, to actually label these things, then you may run the risk of putting them in the wrong spot, at least until you've gotten really, really good at this. So this is slope. So we're going to say it's equal to a line with 2 subtraction signs. We have labeled over there the y sub 2 number as a 5, and the y sub 1 number is a 1. The x sub 2 number is also a 5, and the x sub 1 number is negative 3. So we watch our signs carefully, plus the opposite, and we end up with 5 plus negative 1 is 4, and 5 plus 3 is 8. Now I can leave it as 4/8, or I can simplify it down, and we can say that our slope is 1/2. Okay, this is all step 1. Find the slope. So we've done that. At this point now, it's just like what we've already been doing. We take this slope and you choose one of these coordinates. It doesn't matter which one. Whichever one you want to use, and you plug it into y equals mx plus b, and we are going to solve for b. So let's just say we use 5, 5. It doesn't matter which coordinate, so I'm going to use 5, 5. That means I'm going to stick a 5 in for y. I'm going to put my slope of 1/2 in for m. I'm going to stick the other 5 in for x. And I don't know the b. This should look very familiar. This is what we've just spent the past couple days working on right here, is using a coordinate and a slope to find out what the y-intercept is. So now I can go 5 equals, half of 5 is 2.5 plus b. Add negative 2.5 to both sides. It's just like subtracting 2.5. And we end up with 2.5 is equal to b. Well, that's good to know, because I now have a slope and I have a y-intercept, and that should make it something that I can actually write my equation for now. I can take all this information and I can say, final answer then, y equals 1/2 x plus 2.5. 2.5 and 2.5 are the same. So I needed the slope from the 2 coordinates for here. I used that slope in one of the coordinates to figure out what the y-intercept is. You might be thinking, well, what if I chose the other coordinate? Would it be different? Let's try it with negative 3, 1, just to be sure. So our y value, this is x and y, we would say 1 equals, we still have the same slope of 1/2 times negative 3 plus b. Half of negative 3 is negative 1.5, which means you would then add 1.5 to both sides, and you end up with the exact same answer of 2.5 equals b. So again, same answer. It will not matter which coordinate you use. You don't have to use both. You just pick one. Let's try another one. Write an equation for the following. First thing I'm going to do is label x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. I know that the slope is equal to y sub 2 minus y sub 1, x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So I draw a line, put 2 subtraction signs in it, and I substitute my values. According to this, y sub 2 should go here. I've labeled that as negative 1. Y sub 1 has been labeled as 4. X sub 2 has been labeled as 5. And x sub 1 has been labeled as 1. I watch my signs. I go plus negative, -1 plus -4. That's going to give me a grand total of -5. And down here, 5 plus -1 is 4. So I've got a slope, just to make sure, y sub 2, y sub 1, x sub 2, x sub 1. We watched our signs. We've got -5/4. Now I have to choose one of the coordinates to use in y equals mx plus b so that I can solve for b. I'm going to use that slope here and one of the coordinates. It does not matter which one. So I'll just pick the one that has the positives. So I'm using the coordinate 1, 4. If you recall, that's x, that's y. So I'm going to say 4 equals -5/4 times my x value of 1 plus b. When you multiply -5/4 times 1, you get -5/4 plus b. And all I got to do now is solve for b, so I've got to get rid of -5/4. The opposite of -5/4 is +5/4. Now you might not recognize that 5/4 is actually the same as 1 1/4. So this is really 4 plus 1 1/4. That's what this is right here. So you get a grand total of 5 1/4. So 5 1/4 is my b value. So I can now write my equation because I have the slope of -5/4 and I have the 5 1/4. You can rewrite this as an improper fraction. You could say that's also 21/4. So you can either have it as a mixed number or as an improper fraction, either one. But we're going to say that our final equation is y equals the slope of -5/4 x plus 21/4. And that is our equation. Now that's more complicated looking. I wanted to give you a slightly more difficult example to look at, but it's really based on the same concept. First find the slope, then use the slope to figure out what the y-intercept would be, just like we've done before. It's no different. If I had used 5 -1, then I would have put a -1 here and a 5 here, and it would have still come out to the exact same y-intercept. So it doesn't matter which one of the slopes you choose. But these steps are key. Find the slope first, then use that slope and one of the points, doesn't matter which one, to solve for your y-intercept b, and then you can write your equation using the m and the b that you've found. So this is kind of everything. Nothing's been given except 2 coordinates. You can find information from it.